Experts say that the Israeli campaign in Gaza is one of the most destructive in recent history, and the Iranian leader says the Zionist regime will be eliminated from this earth. What's going on, everyone? Let's take a look at some updates as it relates to the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. I'm recording this at 8 a.m. Central on Sunday, December 24th, 2023. For updated casualty information, see the links in the description below to the Gaza Health Ministry and Al Jazeera, as well as the official sources put out by the IDF. There's no update coming out tomorrow, December 25th, Christmas Day. I do have a video scheduled to be published talking about the Myanmar Civil War and rebel progress during Operation 1027. Now, starting with operations on the ground in Gaza over the past few days, Israel says that they uncovered a sizable tunnel network in the Isa area. It's like every other day now. There's a sizable tunnel network being uncovered. More on that in a second. The IDF put out this infographic here showing the location of a couple of the tunnel entrances near a hospital complex, a school compound, and then an animated clip showing the layout of the tunnel that they were able to map after a dog entered the tunnel network with a camera on its back. And I wanted to show this animated clip here just to stress that the tunnels in Gaza are not just like one strip, connecting one building to another a few meters below ground. These are multi-layered and can veer off in any number of different directions. I actually saw a report recently, that kind of an unofficial report, saying that the IDF was surprised with just how extensive the Hamas tunnel networks were in Gaza. I mean, they knew they were there. They knew the tunnels existed, right? That's not been a secret for a long time. But as they've moved through portions of northern and now southern Gaza, the IDF is just finding these things everywhere. Constant tunnels. And the tunnels are deeper, more extensive, more robust, and more well fortified than it sounds like the IDF originally expected. Now, personally, I'd like to see more of these kind of animated visuals of what the tunnel networks look like as Israeli forces move further into Gaza. The footage from inside of the tunnel is one thing. It's great, but they all kind of look the same at this point. But if we could at some point step back and kind of overlay this type of animation onto the Gaza Strip to show what Hamas had prepared when the IDF moved in, I think that'd be telling. Then shifting up north to Lebanon, Hezbollah in the southern portion of the country carried out multiple attacks against Israel over the past few days. In response, as expected, the Israeli Air Force, as well as artillery units in northern Israel, conducted strikes against Hezbollah targets, rocket launch sites, headquarters, observation posts, and the like. Hezbollah announced the death of a few more of their fighters, kind of losing track at this point, to be honest. They put out a graphic recently that showed, I think, 118 Hezbollah militants that have been killed by Israeli forces since October 8th. Remember, Hezbollah kicked this off a day after the original Hamas attack into Israel. I think the total number now is over 120, close to 124. And look, this is an area that we have to keep an eye on. This is for all of the, escalation steps all across the region in Yemen, with Iran, with U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria. This is it. If there's going to be a full-scale war, conventional style war, kind of a mix, all things considered, that kicks off anytime soon, it's going to be between Israel and up north with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. The Associated Press put out a report the other day saying that the Israeli military campaign in Gaza now sits among the deadliest and most destructive in recent history, which people were piling on this on Twitter. They were not happy with what this said. Now, for starters, in any conflict, no matter who's fighting, you never want them to be compared to some of the deadliest in recent history, right? That's a bad day all around. So it's tragic at baseline. When I saw this, I thought maybe people were taking it a little too far because it said recent history. And look, there's a lot of devastation in Gaza. So when we say recent history, how far back are we going? And I thought maybe they're stopping early. They said in just over 2 months, the offensive in Gaza has wreaked more destruction than the razing of Syria's Aleppo between 2012 and 2016, Ukraine's Mariupol, or proportionally the Allied bombing of Germany in World War II. It has killed more civilians than the U.S.-led coalition did in its 3-year campaign against the Islamic State group. I thought for sure they weren't going to be going as far back as World War II because, and they throw that term in there proportionally. I think they're, again, you hate to compare any of this stuff at all when you're talking about the worst. Nobody wants to be in that conversation. But I think it's hard-pressed to look at Gaza right now and compare that to some of the German cities at the end of World War II, and certainly some of the Japanese cities that ceased to exist, right? Whether it be the fire bombings or the atomic bombs. it's bad. Gaza's bad right now. I don't know that it's made it to the point of comparing it to a Dresden, if you will. They say between 1942 and 1945, the Allies attacked 51 major German cities and towns, destroying about 40 to 50% of their urban areas. This U.S. military historian Robert Pape said that amounted to 10% of buildings across Germany, compared with over 33% across Gaza, a densely populated territory of just 140 square miles. Again, this is where that proportional term comes in, and I don't know that it's applied super accurately. There were portions of Germany that were not completely leveled and were, for the most part, kind of ignored throughout the bombing campaign because they weren't that important. They weren't on the march to Berlin. They didn't have significant military infrastructure. And then you have other areas that did, and they were gone. And they were just complete rubble. I mean, it doesn't take long to pull up pictures of Germany in post-World War II, and those towns there's not much left. So applying that 10% of buildings destroyed across all of Germany, I don't think is the best measure when looking at Gaza. They say during the 2014 to 2017 campaign to defeat Islamic State in Iraq, the coalition carried out nearly 15,000 strikes across the country, according to a London-based independent group that tracks recent conflicts. By comparison, the Israeli military said last week it has conducted 22,000 strikes in Gaza. Now we're talking about something that we can kind of more easily measure, apples to apples. More strikes in this 140 square mile area in, 2.5 months? Than the U.S. and our allies carried out across the entire country of Iraq. And I've seen Syria grouped in there at times as well, but we'll just go with Iraq, kind of narrow it down a little bit, in 3 years. The volume of, I don't think anybody can argue that at this point. The volume of Israeli strikes in Gaza is significant by any measure when looking at recent conflicts. So any criticism of Israeli tactics and strategy, like the Associated Press article here or the Washington Post article I talked about yesterday, where they said that there wasn't enough evidence coming out of Shifa to suggest that it had been used as a command and control center. Those are met with the very rational response of, so what is Israel supposed to do? And look, they're in a tough spot. They're trying to and need to destroy the terrorist organization Hamas, but Hamas has entrenched themselves in the civilian population in one of the most dense urban environments in the entire world. Like, that's not easy. Nobody has the perfect answer for that. And a fight like this is always going to produce civilian casualties. There's no way around it. That is one of the tragedies of war. Now, one of the arguments I've seen put forward is that Israel should be conducting more targeted raids. And I think on the surface, people think that this is just, a special operations team goes in, a couple shots to the head, kills Sinwar, and exits the area, and bam, you've got one less terrorist leader on the battlefield. And the buildings are still standing, and there's no women and children nearby that are killed. That's kind of Hollywood. That's not realistically how this would likely play out. So to give an idea of what that could look like, for starters, I'm sure Hamas would like that. If Israel said no more bombing, we're just going to do these targeted direct action raids, it kind of levels the playing field for Hamas in a lot of ways. Direct combat, direct engagements in these tunnels underground plays in Hamas's favor. But in war, you're never trying to make it even. You don't want that. That's the opposite of what you're going for in warfare. You don't want an even fight with the adversary. You want to stack the odds in your favor as much as possible. So if you think about how some of these direct action raids would have to play out, targeted raids in the Gaza would have to play out, there would have to be ironclad intelligence on the locations of the tunnels as well as their entrances and exits. Israel would then have to air assault into an urban environment, again, one of the most densely packed urban environments in the world, right on top of or nearby those tunnel entrances. They would then have to clear and secure the building sitting atop the tunnel entrance and move down underground. Once they're underground, they have to clear meter by meter, looking for IEDs and booby traps that could collapse the entire tunnel on top of the assault forces. They'd have to fight through these dark tunnels, knowing that there's probably an escape route in the back that they haven't been able to find, and they could clear through this whole thing, maybe detonate multiple IEDs, all for nothing. And then, after this operation underground is complete, they're going to collect the intelligence, collapse the tunnel in on itself, and try to exfil from the area where all of Hamas, all across Gaza, knows this operation is now taking place. And you got to do that over and over and over again. It's a significant risk to Israeli soldiers each time, and every single raid is going to take a long time to plan and execute, and it's just not clear how effective doing that, even every day for months on end, would be at actually rooting out Hamas. So it's not like you can just swap this in, say instead of bombing, let's just do these targeted raids. Maybe for a few select high-value targets. But in terms of eliminating the thousands of Hamas militants running around Gaza, targeted raids is not the answer. And to be fair, that's not really how we fought the global war on terror. I mean, we, most of the time, led with a Hellfire, led with a JDAM. It was, you really got to dig through a lot of the operations to find when the first choice was to put U.S. boots on the ground, conduct an assault, and try to kill or capture that individual. And those were really reserved for more high-value targets in areas where we had a lot of security around, right? Whether it was Iraq or Afghanistan or portions of Syria, it was pretty easy at times to go in and get those forces out if something went wrong. That's not the same situation that the IDF is facing in Gaza. Now, I'm not going to pretend to have a smarter, better strategy than the folks actually waging this war. I would just say that based off of our experience in the United States since 2001, the air war is never enough. You have to have boots on the ground to prevent that enemy organization, be it Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, Taliban in Afghanistan, or in this case, Hamas, from easily reemerging. They still might, but boots on the ground prevents that from happening very quickly and very easily. Now, Israel is doing both of those things. And then the last step, which I don't think we've really figured this out at all in the United States, you have to set conditions to where there's no longer popular support on the ground for the terrorist organization. So that's not some fancy military strategy. It's kind of just common sense. If the root cause of an organization's power and their reason for existing remains, they're going to find a way to come back. Now, I don't know what the right answer is there. I can tell you from our experience that it's more than just opening some schools, providing some jobs, and digging new wells, but it has to be done. 100% has to be done, or you're going to end up just playing this terrorist whack-a-mole forever. Now, I haven't really heard much from Israel as to how they're going to prevent Hamas or an organization like Hamas from reemerging after this Gaza campaign is complete. But to be fair, I don't even know what that would look like. So it's not like it's a three-part plan. We're just waiting for Netanyahu to announce. I'm not sure that Israel, the United States, or the West in general has that totally figured out, but it's got to be done. Has to be a top priority to at least try to figure that out. Then we got reports yesterday that 2 Houthi anti-ship ballistic missiles were fired into international shipping lanes in the southern Red Sea from Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. This was published by U.S. Central Command. They said that the USS Laboon was patrolling in the southern Red Sea as part of Operation Prosperity Guardian and shot down 4 unmanned aerial drones originating from Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen that were inbound to the USS Laboon. No injuries or damage in this incident. So again, depending on you go back through these reports, sometimes it's the U.S. shooting down these drones, and we're not exactly clear what the target was. In other cases like this one, they say it looks like those drones were headed towards the U.S. ship. Additionally, it sounds like 2 ships in the southern Red Sea announced that they were under attack to U.S. forces in the region. The Blominen, a Norwegian-flagged, owned, and operated chemical tanker, reported a near miss of a Houthi one-way attack drone. They say no injuries or damage reported. And then a second vessel, the Saibaba, an Indian-flagged crude oil tanker, reported that it was hit by a one-way attack drone. I haven't heard details on the extent of the damage, but they did say that no injuries were reported. Now, I want to pull up a graphic put together by Damian Simon on Twitter. He's putting these out pretty regularly, showing the extent of the attacks in the Red Sea areas. Worth checking out, and I'll link his account in the description below. According to the Pentagon, they say the Kim Pluto, a Liberia-flagged, Japanese-owned, and Netherlands-operated chemical tanker. Sorry, there's just so many countries involved with international shipping. They say it was struck at approximately 10 a.m. local time in the Indian Ocean, 200 nautical miles from the coast of India, by a one-way attack drone fired from Iran. So there was some speculation a few weeks ago that Iran had fired a drone just based off of the location in the Indian Ocean. That one kind of fell off the radar, but it sounds like once more Iran is being accused at least of firing drones at international shipping in the Indian Ocean. Now, looking at the impact that this is having, the cost of shipping goods has increased by roughly 45% in the past week as some of the largest international shipping companies have completely paused their activity in the Red Sea, or they've chosen diversionary routes that can add up to 2 weeks to some of the shipping times. Now, there is a very real immediate impact felt here when the price of shipping jumps like it has, but to put it in context, it's still well below where shipping costs were when they spiked in 2021 and 2022. Then we got a couple interesting comments here from the Iranian leader Khamenei and the Taliban foreign minister Muttaqi. So Khamenei, in a speech yesterday, said, quote, "Do not doubt that the victory is with the righteous front. do not doubt that the usurping Zionist regime will be eradicated from earth. He described the past few months as a unique and extraordinary phenomenon in the recent history of the Islamic world, the likes of which we haven't had in recent history and perhaps in the last century. He said, quote, "This incident is unique from both sides," talking about the ongoing war in Gaza. From the side of the Zionist regime, it is unique because this kind of brutality, criminality, and bloodlust has never been seen in the period I mentioned. On the other side, the side of the Palestinian people and Palestinian fighters, this kind of standing patience, resistance, and driving the enemy crazy has never been seen. And he called the fighters in Gaza fierce, like a rock. And I thought this was notable. First off, we don't get a lot of statements directly from the Iranian leader. But in this case, not just praising Hamas, not just praising the Palestinian people and saying that they're standing with those in Gaza, but saying that the Zionist regime will be eradicated from earth. You know, that's not necessarily surprising coming from Iran. They've stated that in the past, but it tends to be a little more nuanced than that. That one's kind of right on the nose, letting you know how they really feel about things. Then the Taliban Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi visited Iran yesterday for the Consultative Conference on Palestine, where he gave some interesting comments on how the Taliban and the Afghan people, that he says he speaks on behalf of, are viewing the war in Gaza. And look, no big fan of the Taliban here, but I think they're doing a pretty interesting job of moderating their view, especially to the international community, right? They're trying to present themselves as the legitimate governing authority of Afghanistan and not a terrorist entity trying to just kill everyone in their path. So he says, quote, "The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, as a system that has arisen from within its people and has ended the 20-year occupation of America and NATO in Afghanistan with the help of Allah and the steadfastness and resilience of the Afghan mujahideen and heroic people, today feels the pain and suffering of the Palestinian Muslims with all its heart and soul." So kind of relating what the Afghan people went through with U.S. and NATO forces in their country since 2001, saying, hey, we struggled against oppression. We understand why the Palestinians are struggling with oppression from the Israelis. That's the presentation here by the Taliban. They say the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, as part of the Islamic Ummah, has always condemned the ongoing atrocities by the Zionist regime in Gaza and occupied Palestine, and considers the struggle of the Palestinian nation as legitimate and based on Sharia texts and international law. Shouldn't be a big surprise there. All kind of lines up. The Taliban historically haven't talked a lot about Gaza, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's just not been a top priority. Again, we've talked about this in the past, but the Taliban's a very local movement. Their goal is Afghanistan. Their focus is Afghanistan. So they'll opine on various regions around the world or various issues around the world. But unlike a group like Al-Qaeda or Islamic State that might take an issue, a current event, and say, like, that's our reason, that's why we're doing what we're doing, it's not really the Taliban. The Taliban are there to govern Afghanistan in accordance with their beliefs. He said the issue of Palestine is not limited to the Palestinian people. Rather, it is an Arab, Islamic, and ultimately human issue. No free man who believes in justice and human values can watch with indifference the Zionist regime's atrocities in Palestine. I was talking to a friend about this yesterday, so it was interesting to see this come up. But I think some of the anger and frustration that we're seeing, and I can really only speak for here in the United States, against some of the actions that our government is taking in supporting Israel, is we see pictures and videos and read about the children that are killed. And I think it's human nature to look at that and say there's never a good time. There's never a time where children are legitimate targets, and it's okay for children to be killed even in the middle of a war. We should always avoid that at all costs. But there's been so much presented on the other side of there's no innocent Palestinians and everyone is guilty. And if they're in Gaza, they supported the October 7th attacks. And I think we have a hard time balancing that. So we're told that in one sense, and then we see dead children and we say, that doesn't line up. I don't care what their parents did or where they were born or where they happen to live today. The children are not responsible for what happened. And I think, for what it's worth, that the Taliban kind of hit that on the head right there. And then in wrapping up, they say the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan stands ready within its capabilities to accompany the Islamic world in this humanitarian and Islamic issue. The Taliban don't really have the means to do much in this conflict. They've got their hands full in Afghanistan in a lot of ways. They're in an all-out war with Islamic State in the eastern part of the country. Again, these are words. It's support that they're voicing for the Palestinian people. But even if there was some, significant Islamic coalition to come in and help govern Gaza after the fact. The Taliban aren't the ones that they're going to be pulling from. They're just, again, very, very occupied with just trying to get control over Afghanistan right now. But that's all I've got for now. Of course, if interested in national security subjects, be sure to check out the sit reps I put out on Substack. A link is in the description below. Substack now also has ad-free, sponsor-free videos that go live about 1 hour before they're up on YouTube. And from now until December 31st, Substack annual plans are 20% off. But thanks for watching. Have a Merry Christmas. I'll see y'all next time.